I'm very excited about this next. I mean, actually, this program is just so good. Yeah, he says, you know. But just like everyone, I'm so excited to talk to because I'm a consumer of almost all of the products in one way or another. And this one is like more than YouTube on a daily basis I spend with the New York Times. And it's not just because I'm a journalist or, you know, I read most of the New York Times. It's because of all the other stuff the New York Times is now doing. And the woman behind that is with us. Please join me in welcoming Alex Hardiman, the Chief Product Officer of the New York Times. Welcome. Over here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
It has been an incredible day so far.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm inspired.
You're getting good ideas?
So many.
Yeah.
This concept is really brilliant. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're here, and I can, you know, give you grief about how unintuitive is in fact a spelling bee word.
I am the chief complaint officer as well, so feel free to bring it. Yeah.
Obviously, the New York Times is a news organization, and that's the core of the brand. And you know, I imagine it's pretty busy in the office these days because there's a lot of news, But we're not going to talk about all of that, you know, and we won't argue about politics. So I want to ask you this, because it is I'm in the media business, and it is a relatively new role, the Chief Product Officer at a media company, because forever there was one product, and it was the news, right? So what is a Chief Product Officer at the New York Times?
You would be surprised to actually still get that question from reporters at the New York Times. So it's a fair one. I am the first Chief Product Officer. And it's probably simplest to describe what a product is at the New York Times, and then it makes sense what I do. So in the most basic sense, our product is our journalism. And we try to marry that journalism with a really compelling and useful user experience that people can act on our journalism to understand and engage with the world around them. And that applies to our whole portfolio of news and lifestyle products, which is so much more expansive than it was 10 years ago. We do have news, and we'll talk more about news, but we also now have market leaders in games, sports, cooking, shopping, and there's some other spaces like audio where we're trying to find fit. And so my job is two things. One, working across the leadership of the company to make sure that we feel like we are investing in the right news and lifestyle categories where we feel like we can win and we can meet a range of new news and life needs to become even more essential to our audiences. And then the second is within those categories, how do we keep building more and more value and just stay relentlessly focused on growth. So I feel like I have one of the best jobs in the media business. I'm not gonna lie.
You do have the best job in the media business.
One of the best, there are many.
Of all the 7 or 8 jobs left, you have the best one.
Oh, we will talk about that too.
No, I know you're growing. A lot of other companies are growing, and one of the reasons you're growing is because of the breadth of products and the innovation that you've brought and the fit you've found by listening to your audience and expanding it. Can you break down the overall, like, you know, you mentioned them, but I'd be curious if you could, how much percentage of time or engagement is with news? Is that kind of the monster of your business? And how much is it with like Wordle or with games, right? And cooking and audio, there's a lot of stuff going on. So how does it break down, if you can, maybe broad strokes?
Let's do that. And I do just, your point, I know it's a joke just about how few players are in the media space, but can I just contextualize where we actually fit in the media space, and then we can break it down? So, you know, we're in the news and lifestyle category, but we're really in a bit of a class of our own, and it's really hard to actually benchmark our competitive set. If you look at other news and lifestyle publishers, they are doing amazing work, but at a much smaller scale. We tend to bring in anywhere from 50 to 100 million people to our products every week, and that's a normal week. In peak moments, it can be 2 to 3x that. And if you talk to people like in the publishing space, they'll say, well, you're at the top. But the truth is, we have so much more room for growth. If you look at the big video and music streamers, Spotify or Netflix, they have at least 20x the subscriber base that we have. We're proud to have about 10.5 million subscribers, But I think for us, it's a pretty important indication that we have to be more ambitious as a publishing industry, and we do have so much value creation ahead if we think about it that way. So we're kind of like a media platform, actually, of news and lifestyle products that sits somewhere between traditional publishing and the biggest players. Within that, to your point about news, we use this metaphor of the solar system to describe the power of news relative to the other products because it's a really important distinction for us. News is the sun, meaning news is the reason why the New York Times exists, full stop. It is the largest supply of quality coverage. It is also the largest supply of audience coming to us in a given week. It is what drives the most amount of engagement with subscribers, and it does drive the majority, well over half of our subscriber business and our digital advertising revenue. It's also so much more than politics and war. When people think news, you probably think like breaking news, you think live, you think what happened last weekend, and that's central, but news is also health and wellness and culture and love and relationships and all of these tools to live a really rich life. And that builds equity, and that builds trust, and that builds expertise. And those are the elements that then give us brand permission to get into the other lifestyle spaces like games, cooking, sports. And so people love games, for instance, because they trust the umbrella of the New York Times brand. And that's a very important sharing of brand permission that we have that goes from news to essentially the planets of, say, a lifestyle product like games. Within the lifestyle category, games and sports are the two biggest. We've seen with games just incredible growth. We've actually, our first crossword launched in 1942 during World War II when people really needed a reprieve from the intensity of the news cycle. So we do have a really long history and legacy with crosswords, but there was this real moment when Wordle just kind of woke people up to the idea that you could actually have a daily habit if you were younger, if you were more international, if you weren't necessarily willing to commit 30 minutes a day to a crossword, and that's if you're really good. And that was a really big moment for us to expand into that area. The Athletic, which we acquired a few years ago, similarly has huge market potential. And so we see that we bring in tens of millions of people through these on-ramps of lifestyle products. And it's been fantastic because these are people who are incremental. There's been a lot of talk about incrementality today, which I think is so important. For us, lifestyle products bring incremental audience and incremental attention that actually complement news and don't compete with it.
I have noticed, though, that if I'm in the middle of the B or Wordle, you're not trying to push me to news. You're leaving me alone, which I appreciate. Don't change.
Can I tell you something really interesting, though? We really try to build games that are, we say, like thoughtfully made and thoughtfully played, because we want to be really thoughtful and respectful of your time. But the number of people who come to games and then organically find their way to news is pretty astonishing. Or the number of people who come to games and don't just buy a game subscription, they buy the full bundle. It's a pretty remarkable thing where games is able to still help show the aperture of the brand.
Well, and I think it's at least in part because the brands are consistent, right? I know there's a New York Times editor making decisions about what words are allowed.
Like unintuitive.
Like unintuitive is not allowed, apparently, but others are that make no sense.
I know.
Anyway.
I know.
But and you can kind of feel that at work, and it feels like the New York Times is making editorial decisions. That you have an editorial point of view when it comes to your games, or to your cooking, or to the comments in the cooking, and the moderation behind the comments in the cooking, right? I want to pull back for a second, given that we're talking about the news business, and remind everybody that you worked at the Times for quite a while. During probably in the media industry, in the news industry, one of the most important pivots of any company, which was the New York Times deciding, after some memos leaked and some much sort of introspection, to really focus on building a subscriber base, right? And to really redouble your efforts in digital. And you were part of all of that, and then you left for a little bit and took a little hiatus.
An externship is what we like to call
it.
A 3.5-year externship. Yeah.
But it wasn't like you went to the Houston Chronicle. You went to Facebook, which was literally the bugaboo of the news industry, right? So what'd you learn in the belly of the beast?
How much time do we have? No, it's a great question. I mean, the Facebook, now Meta, and the Times are very, very different companies, but there are a couple of things that I really valued from my time at Meta that are helping me and my teams, I think, lead and drive value creation. The first is to only go after big things. I remember one of my very first product reviews. I came in and I was presenting what I thought was a $3 billion idea.
Now, by product reviews, explain that in the tech world.
Sorry, so a product review is basically, I mean, it's a product-driven company, and so a product review is when you come into Mark or one of his direct reports, and you basically lay out your vision for how you're going to drive whatever your portfolio is.
Zuckerberg,
forward.
not Pritchard.
Correct. The other Mark, the lesser Mark. Just kidding. Just kidding. And I was so excited, and I laid this out, and the response that my manager could not have been more underwhelmed. And he said, you know, who cares about $3 billion?
With a B?
With a B. And I looked at him and he said, I want you to come back and show me what it would take to grow GDP in that market. And that was a really big moment for me because I was like, I was thinking too small. And so when you come back to the publishing industry, which has just been battered and really facing so many headwinds, it's a really big reminder, I think, that, you know, for us at the New York Times, when we think about what we're trying to do, we're a 173-year-old company. We intend to be here for at least another 173 years. I think that at P&G, that really means something to us as a company with incredible legacy and tradition. And so when we make big moves, we want to drive generational change. So no small things and really playing the long game are two really, really important lessons that I took.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you, off script here, sorry, but are you, there isn't a script, by the way. There's just some
Definitely
questions.
not.
But are you happy with the Metas of the world right now from your perch at the New York Times? Do you think that they are good partners? Sorry, Facebook people who might be listening online.
No, I think, here's what I honestly think. I think that it is really important for an organization like the New York Times to be very assertive about the role that it wants to play, and therefore how to drive value creation, and in our case, our own business. And when news organizations in the past have put too much reliance on a single platform to distribute their audience, to acquire their audiences, to really drive their revenues, I think that is very, very precarious, because for an organization like the New York Times, our mission is about seeking the truth and helping people understand the world. And we build a business that really helps enable that at scale. Other platforms have different incentives and different goals. Having them pick up and take on the mantle of assuming the responsibility of journalism, I just think as a publisher, that's our job.
Right.
And we will find ways to partner with fair value exchange, but that's very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What a great segue to talking about AI. Because all of those large platforms are, of course, major players now in AI. And then there's a new one, OpenAI, and several new ones, Anthropic, OpenAI, many of them backed by those big platforms. And you lead the Times approach to AI. And the company is a standout in the industry and in the headlines for holding out, where many of your industry peers have said, we're going to cut a deal and get as much money as we can right now. I mean, from the Atlantic to the AP to, I mean, a lot of, you know, hallowed 100-plus-year-old brands have said, you know, we're going to get a check cut to us right now from these guys because, you know, we don't want to fight. But the New York Times is suing OpenAI. And if it's settled this morning, go ahead and make a fool of me, but it hasn't settled yet, has it?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, no matter what, you'll probably get more money from them if you do settle. But can you talk to me about how that decision was taken and sort of why that necessary tension between the leaders in AI and the New York Times?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really interesting. So I'll just start by saying that at the Times, we do believe that generative AI, I think like so many of you, it really has the potential to be one of the most powerful technologies leading the next chapter of the internet and potentially the next chapter of our lives. And you can see how we are covering it quite relentlessly in the news. Many of you, might have seen, for instance, one of our tech columnists got in a conversation with an AI agent who fell in love with him and tried to break up his marriage. I mean, we've had some really fascinating reporting.
That was Kevin, right?
Kevin Roos. Yeah. And we are using AI in a bunch of ways to make our journalism more accessible across the business. So there really is a lot of potential. But what we believe is that it is incredibly important for LLMs and the tools to be built and used responsibly. And that means that for people who have an extraordinary amount of high quality content and IP that is very expensive to produce and often is produced at great risk, there just needs to be permission and value exchange. And so if you read our complaint against actually both Microsoft and OpenAI, right, we basically state that we believe that they work together to use our content and our journalism without permission and without fair value exchange. So that's really what that's about.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, hope that goes to trial. Just putting it out there, because it would be a really fun trial to pay attention to. Just really quick, can we go back to games for a second? Because I'm addicted to the bee, and sometimes I spend more time with the bee than I do with the news. And then I feel guilty. And I'm probably the reason, or at least one of them, that people go back and forth, because I'm like, I got to go back and read some more news before I can earn my way back to figuring out whatever the panagram is. So I'd be curious, like, that's also probably true for people in food, right? Are you seeing this as, is it growing faster than the overall news? Do the numbers bear out that you're seeing, or what insights are you seeing from people who are using all of those products? Any change over the last few years?
Well, let me talk about games and then about people who use multiple products, because they're kind of interesting and distinct. So games has just been fun, I'm not gonna lie. Actually, my head of games, if he were here, would maybe roll his eyes a little bit, but I actually call games the Taylor Swift strategy. Because if you think about it, what product can bring together 88-year-olds, multi-generations up to 98-year-olds, with such an amazing power to bridge and bond over Wordle, Connections, Spelling Bee, the Mini,
yeah, you must be like
Strands.
20% of SMS messages every time Wordle comes out.
But it's not just me. I mean, Questlove came in and he told us, he's like, I wake up every morning, I pray, I do my affirmations, and I go try to beat my 2 Wordle groups. 2, because that doesn't have 1, he has 2. Yeah. It has such a powerful habit. And so what we have found with games is that the growth has been really explosive. I mean, we had 8 billion gameplays last year. We have tens of millions of people coming in every day and every week. More people play Wordle or Connections now than watch the top primetime and cable TV shows at night. I mean, it's really, really powerful. And the cultural relevance piece, that is the thing that has been so deep and so wonderful to see. And so the growth rate of games, I have to say, has really surpassed our expectations. But then what we find is that games is a great on-ramp into other products. Right. Games to the athletic and sports, games to news. And from an economic perspective, when people have a really strong habit with just 2 products in our portfolio, they are more likely to buy the bundle, they are more likely to engage and retain longer, and very importantly, they're more likely to pay more over time with a higher ARPU. And so that is the whole model working, where a single product with a high growth rate like games will actually start to drive more growth for other products in the portfolio and incentivize subscribers to actually take the whole thing, because economically it just makes more sense. Yeah. And that's why we're really leaning into the power of each individual funnel and then getting better at cross-promoting them, but in a way, to your point, where if you just want games, we're not going to push you to Gaza. Right. We want to make sure that you still feel like you're in control. No, that's not happening. Yeah.
I want to give you an opportunity, because I think like a marketer a lot, and when I heard 8 billion was it 8 billion?
8 billion plays last year.
8 billion plays last year. I'm like, okay, how do I get me some of that? Like, how do I get in there? Right? Now, I'm not, thank you for not pushing us to Gaza, but maybe also don't push us to an ad, which you don't. But what are the ways that marketers can engage in this new world? And are you open to co-creating? This is something that P&G has been extremely good at over the years, is co-creating new ways of engaging with consumers, leveraging new habits.
Absolutely. I mean, we, for a very long time, had built a premium digital ad business within news that was derivative of our subscription business.
Right.
Premium ad canvases tied to our first-party data program, because we now have a little over 160 million direct relationships. And so a very, very high quality, high attention audience. We have now been extending those capabilities and those offerings to games, to sports, and to other products in the bundle. And the results have been fantastic, actually. So we're very interested, obviously, in partnering with marketers to understand their objectives and to figure out what we can do that is custom and really high efficiency. And I think there's this meme that the New York Times is really just all politics and news, but we do have all of these other moments of joy and wonder that we create for consumers, which are some of the strongest habits that we have. And so we have worked in cooking with brands like Instacart to figure out how to help. Like for us, our cooking strategies is to make it easier for people to find and make something delicious in under 30 minutes on any given day. And so the idea of being able to click with Instacart to get the ingredients delivered in under an hour to then cook that recipe, that's brilliant. It's a win-win on both sides. And so really very interested in figuring out how to work with marketers on true value creation and generation that is bidirectional in both ways. Because there's so much more value to co-create together. Yeah. So there's a lot within news, but also really outside of news as well.
Great. Well, I wish we could keep going. I'd love to go like deep inside the media beltway with you, but we'll have to end it there. Please join me in thanking Alex Hardiman for coming to Signal.
Thank you.